Okay, I'm Maggie Peterson, and I did my research project over speaking strategies, and I think that speaking strategies are a really important thing for teachers to keep in mind and be aware of, because for a lot of students, speaking can be one of the most terrifying aspects of learning a second language. I broke this into beginning learners, intermediate learners, and advanced language learners. Some key research that I did about speaking strategies, and a few activities that I found that I thought were fun and interesting. So first of all, beginning learners, it's really important to get beginning learners speaking as much as possible right from the start. So to promote speaking, you want to provide something for speakers to talk about. So as a teacher, you might want to consider using manipulables in the classroom to do that. Also, using group work and pair work in the class is a good idea. And using effective seating charts that will promote speaking. So using tango seating or inside-outside circle seating are good things to consider. Some tasks for beginning learners would be conversations and interviews. Secondly, information gap and jigsaw activities. This could be like one student telling another student about their family, and the student that's listening would draw a picture of a family tree or something like that. Third, scripted dialogues, drama, and role-playing. You might want to pre-teach words that students could use to include key vocabulary so that they can do this task more effectively. Logic puzzles are also good to use, picture-based activities, and finally physical actions. So actually getting up and doing what the language is saying is going to help them remember the language more and be able to use it. The total physical response goes along with that. For intermediate learners right here, some basic principles for them. You want to use tasks that require negotiation of meaning. So when students are negotiating for meaning, they're going to bring the language down to their level and make it more comprehensible for them, so that's really important. Using both transactional and interpersonal activities in your classroom are important. The transactional activities are going to be communicating to get something specific done, while the interpersonal activities are more for social reasons. And finally, personalizing the content that you use, so including student names, student jobs, student majors, student interests, things like that. Some tasks for intermediate learners are role-playing, more picture-based activities like collaborative storytelling, and logic puzzles are really great. For advanced learners, the same principles that applied for intermediate learners are going to apply for advanced learners as well, except there are a few additions. One is combining both fluency and accuracy in the classroom. So instead of working on those skills separately, you want to work on them at the same time. Encouraging students to take risks in the classroom so that they don't hit a lull in their learning, and we're keep pushing them forward. Also, we want the students to notice the gap in their speaking. So making them notice how they're pronouncing things compared to how a native speaker would pronounce it. So they're noticing that gap, and then they can work to close it. Some tasks for advanced learners would be conversations, information gap and jigsaw activities, picture-based activities, extemporaneous speaking, which would be like plain speaking, so a rehearsed speech, something like that, and role plays and simulations. So some key research that I did about speaking strategies, according to Cotter-Hugh, speaking can be divided into two main categories, which would be accuracy and fluency. Accuracy would be using grammar and vocabulary correctly, while fluency would be speaking smoothly and clearly, so you're getting that fluency. For accuracy, teachers might want to do drills, scripted dialogues, or short questions that prompt language. And fluency, you want your advanced speakers to be using conversation and just having it more natural rather than just reacting to something, really doing that communication. According to Beer, conversation skills, students might become inhibited while they're speaking because they need to include their point of view or their opinion in something. So to eliminate them being inhibited by having to share their opinion, we should, as teachers, just cut out that part and assign student roles and student opinions so that they're concentrating solely on the speaking and not being afraid of sharing their opinion. So that's what Hugh talked about there. Colorado State University talked about quantity versus quality. They talked about how shy students are going to speak less in the classroom, and so if the goal of the class is to produce speech and you're not as worried about making errors, then you're going to need to encourage those shy students to speak more. So really getting to know your students on a personal level and knowing how they're going to be interacting in the classroom will let you as a teacher push those students in the directions that they need to go. Preparing for speaking tasks is really important. Colorado State University talks about this. Teachers should introduce the topics and model the topic for students, and also give clear and specific directions so that students can be most successful. So using that sort of preparation in your task is going to allow students to be more successful. Finally, Colorado State University talked about correcting speaking errors and how it's important to correct speaking errors with students. However, you don't want to do it in a way that's going to interrupt their flow of communication. So you want to maybe jot down notes while students are speaking and then address those problems later so that you're not interrupting them. Some fun activities that I found. The first one is from Beer, and one idea, these are all conversation ideas. This one was a debate, are men and women equal? So students would have to use some phrases for disagreement and more opinion statements and things like that. So this would be for higher level learners. Another one was a game about creating a new society where students would have to decide what laws and what freedoms people are going to have in a society. And the third one was a beginner dialogue on introductions, and I liked this one because it gave students some key vocabulary to use in there. So it was really pushing them for that. According to Chada, he came up with some role plays and information gap activities. The first one was called Neighbors at Odds, where there's two neighbors and they have conflicting things going on, and so they're having to have some confrontation and use those opinions and disagreement phrases. So that's good, and I think students would really enjoy that situation too. Another one was find someone in the class who liked to cook, for example. And then once you found that person, you ask them questions about cooking. So like, how often do you cook? Or what do you like to cook? Things like that. So I really liked the question addition to that activity. And finally, the information gap activity about a Korean folk story. And I thought it was interesting to have a folk story as the information gap activity. And I think doing that rather than just more of a business card information gap activity or something like that would add some interest, and students would really enjoy it. So you wouldn't necessarily have to use a Korean folk story, but just a story I think students would enjoy in the classroom. So that is my research on speaking activities and speaking strategies. So, thanks.